All right, you guys, we're going to learn two different things, and I'll probably put them in two different movies just to keep them shorter. We're going to learn about atmospheric circulation, vertical atmospheric circulation. So here's the Earth in the different latitudes. Right here's the equator. Here's Santa's workshop. And so what you're seeing is you're seeing the wind belts and boundaries, and we're going to talk about those second of all. But what we're going to talk about first is this pattern. And, you know, sometimes these little cogs catch, but these are just like gears, so check these out. This is what we're going to learn first, and then we're going to translate that over to surface winds. Okay, so what you need is you need a download of this chart right here. And again, let me zoom in a little bit. All right, so this is what you need. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do the atmospheric circulation. So that's going to go on the outside here. And what I'm going to do is try to give you guys a lot of hints about how this is actually a lot easier than you think. Now, one thing that's kind of important is you got to remember that cog action. So see my fingers as if my fingers are gears. When we have an area of low pressure, we're going to have the gears coming up. And then where we have a high area of high pressure, we're going to have kind of the gears coming down. Now, the one thing that I always start with, and I'm going to start with this on both, is I always remember that it rains every day at the equator. Okay, so here's clouds, and that's not sunshine, that's rain coming down. And when I remember that, if you guys ever watch the news, whenever we talk about having a low pressure system, which we've had a lot of lately, that's because we have air rising. And rising air creates, rain. So areas of low pressure. So if I always remember, this is going to say equatorial low, that I have an equatorial low. Okay. Might help if my pen works, right? So here's my equatorial low. It's actually pretty easy. On either side of my low, I'm going to have a high. Okay. And this high is called the subtropical high. And guess what? This is also the subtropical high. We're going to learn everything is symmetrical about the equator. Now, in areas of high pressure, air is falling, it's sinking. And typically in areas of high pressure, what we have is clear and dry. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be hot, okay? It just means it's going to be clear and dry. When we have a high in the winter, that's where it's actually the coldest because we don't have those clouds to keep in the warmth. And then obviously when we have a high in the summer, oh my goodness, does it cook. All right, then remember that since we have a high here, we will then have another low on either side. Remember, it goes low, and then we'll also have a high here. This is the subpolar, because it's below the poles, low. Okay, and this is also the subpolar low. All right, and then finally, we're going to have another high at the poles, and not surprisingly, it's going to be called the polar high. Okay, the polar high. Let me just write this here, polar high. Okay, can you see everything on here? No. Okay, guys, sorry, this is a one-shot wonder here. All right, so the polar high, and then just remember, you start with the equatorial low. It rains every day at the equator. I remember it's a low. A low is an area where air rises. And then on either side, we're going to have a high. On either side, a low. On either side, the high. All right, and I'm just going to do half the globe. We could keep it going. Now, you guys, you got to remember that action that I was showing you. So where I have the low, I'm going to have the air rising up, and it's going to rise up, and it's going to move over. Okay, and so wherever you have a low, it moves up and over. Okay, remember that hand action. And again, if you remember that finger action that I was showing you, that where I have a high, it's coming down. So here's my low, up and over, up and over. Okay, so up and over, and then at my high, they're coming down together. So this is the vertical atmospheric circulation. Now in a different color, I'm going to put the surface winds, because this is what we're going to eventually translate and put across the surface here. Now what you have to remember for this is that wind always goes from high to low. It never goes from low to high. It's a density thing. It's trying to equalize and become an equilibrium. And so what it's going to always do is going to try to reach equilibrium is it's going to move from high to low. Now if you remember that, and so here I have a high, here I have a low below the wind. Okay, here I have a high, here I have a low below the wind. So the wind always blows from high to low, okay, high to low. Just find your highs and blow towards the lows, high to low, okay, and high to low. All right, you guys, so this is the complete atmospheric circulation. So it's just like that model that I started with where you have the cogs or the gear type things, and where you have the low, it's coming up. And remember what I start with. I start with number one. I remember that it always rains at the equator, okay? And because of that, I know I have a low, and I know the low has rising air. So I have to put my arrow up. Now, the other thing to remember is that if you have a low here, on either side you have highs, on either side you have lows, and on either side of that you have highs. It's the beautiful symmetry. All right, and then it has to work like a gear. And then the last and final thing is this. Remember that wind always blows from high to low. And we're going to use that principle again in my next little movie. All right, so this is what I call vertical. So this is not the world wind belts. This is the vertical atmospheric circulation. All right.